Hey everyone, today we're talking about seed oils. If you've seen my other videos on my channel, then you know that I'm not the biggest fan of these seed oils, and I think it was time to do a pretty scientific deep dive into why cherry picking certain studies won't really work out. What is really the deal with seed oils? What are they? How to think about them when we move forwards. So seed oils fundamentally are the oils that are squeezed out of seeds. You wouldn't actually naturally encounter them in any non-modernized society. So think about soybean oil, corn oil, canola oil, which is really rapeseed oil. I've had 5 different conversations about them this week, and as they're getting a lot of heat, I thought that we should do a video describing and explaining how they all work. To begin to scratch the surface in understanding seed oils, you have to understand the different types of fats there are. So fundamentally, the main issue with seed oils is a kind of fat called linoleic acid, otherwise known as omega-6. It is actually the most common fat found in most seed oils, and you physically, as a human, can't synthesize or make it. It's technically classified as an essential fatty acid, which means that as a living being, you would die if you didn't ever eat any of it. I think some of the science around that is a little questionable. I'm not an expert in that specific knowledge base, but let's say for argument's sake, it is essential. It's important in making every different cell and having your cells communicate with each other in your body. And so here's the catch. 2 things happen. 1, too much linoleic acid causes massive problems, and an imbalance of a linoleic acid against an omega-3 fat is also an issue. Most people in the US, or let's say in the modern world, eat way too much linoleic acid on the whole, and they eat way too much linoleic acid in proportion to omega-3 fats. This imbalance and overabundance of linoleic acid causes damage to most of our cells and inflammation all over our bodies. That's not good news. The main issue is once you eat linoleic acid, your body then breaks it down into multiple other fats and breakdown products which cause damage and inflammation all over your body. Linoleic acid itself is very easy to damage with oxygen, and you create something called lipid peroxidation byproducts. Now, the funny thing about linoleic acid that always comes up for me in a general discussion is it's a very weak fat. It is very, very susceptible to breaking down into these other products. And what causes that breakdown? Well, heat can do it, sunlight can do it, and oxygen can do it. So before you've even eaten the seed oils, them sitting in a bottle on a shelf in a supermarket, they will be breaking down in the light of the supermarket, in the oxygen that they were exposed to when they were put into the bottle, and in the heat during the refining process. Which is a side note to add here. Some people believe that if you get cold pressed seed oils, they're totally fine. And the funny thing is, they actually have to be exposed to more oxygen when they are cold pressed. Based on the basic food regulations, they need to be more oxygenated. And so they are more prone to breakdown products when they are cold pressed seed oils versus chemically refined seed oils. So lipid peroxidation, where you're breaking down linoleic acid, produces all sorts of awful byproducts. Things like 4-HNE, which is 4-hydroxynonenal, is actually toxic to cells. Funnily enough, probably one of the only real measures of oxidative stress in the blood is your levels of 4-HNE. 4-HNE only comes from omega-3 and omega-6 fats. So if you're measuring oxidative stress and it only comes really from seed oils in the diet, can you see the connection there? All of this 4-HNE circulating around your body creates oxidative stress. It's basically like rusting all of the different cells in your body. And this rusting is linked to heart disease, Alzheimer's, brain damage, cancer. And here's something that no one really talks about. This breakdown is a self-eating snake. It goes around in a circle. So the more linoleic acid you eat, the more breakdown products you will produce, the more oxidative stress will occur, which will then further break down the next set of linoleic acid that you've eaten, and it just goes round and round and round. And this is a massive deal because it's pretty hard to avoid seed oils. They are in almost everything. And then the way that we raise our chicken, turkey, and pork in America, the fat of those animals is effectively a seed oil too. And so is that the whole story? Well, not quite. If you remove the absolute amount of linoleic acid and you get it a bit lower, there's still the question of the omega-6 to omega-3 balance. There is a ton of science that looks into health issues that people develop, and then it takes a look at their omega-6 to omega-3 balance. And almost every time they find that their omega-6 ratio to omega-3 is massively skewed. A side note here that if you are eating huge amounts of omega-6 linoleic acid, you can't then balance it out by trying to eat loads of omega-3. Omega-3 fatty acids are also very, very weak and prone to lipid peroxidation. To get the amount of omega-3 you would need to offset the amount of linoleic acid in a normal kind of standard American diet, you'd be talking about taking 50 to 100 fish oil pills every single day. And I don't recommend anybody take fish oil pills. To get the fish oil into the pill, you are going to be oxidating and breaking down the omega-3 fats. By the time you're taking that fish oil pill, you're probably taking something pretty close to toxic poison. So let's zoom in to cells. I want to talk about cell membranes. Every cell in your body has a requirement to be made up of some amount of polyunsaturated fat. Now that's either omega-3, omega-6, or omega-9. We as humans will make omega-9 when we're deficient in 3 and 6. If you're abundant in omega-6, linoleic acid, you won't make omega-9. And so your cells actually don't really know how to care what kind of polyunsaturated fat goes in them. They just have a set requirement. We need this much polyunsaturated fat to make the cell. And they will make that based on whatever is circulating in your body. So if you eat a ton of linoleic acid, it will make all your cells, or the cells that are being made will be made of higher amounts of linoleic acid. Or if you became pretty overweight from eating a lot of processed food, and then you stop eating linoleic acid, but you lose a bunch of weight, the cells will continue to be made by mostly linoleic acid in that polyunsaturated fat requirement, because that's what's circulating in your body if it's coming out of your fat stores. And when you make cells with too much linoleic acid in the cell membrane, the cell wall becomes really unstable. This shows up a lot in, let's say, your cholesterol. LDL cholesterol on the whole is essential and mostly inert. It's pretty foundationally required for a human to function. But if you have a lot of linoleic acid in your diet, your LDL cholesterol will have a higher proportion of polyunsaturated fat in the cholesterol molecule, which does two things. One, it makes the LDL cholesterol molecule more likely to be oxidized. It's weaker. And because you have the linoleic acid and the lipid peroxidation and the 4-H&E, you have a higher oxidative stress environment. So you're actually both creating LDL particles that are more likely to be oxidized, and then you're creating an environment that is more likely to oxidize your LDL particles. Oxidized LDL is the fundamental driver of cardiovascular disease. Oxidized LDL is damaged LDL. That's the stuff that will stick to your artery walls. People often argue about saturated fats versus polyunsaturated fats. And the challenge that I have in almost every one of these conversations is that you can find studies that make both look really good. The challenge is when you look at the actual studies, they'll be underpowered or they'll be short term. And there are a number of considerations that need to be taken when looking at this for the long term that make a very clear argument that linoleic acid and polyunsaturated fats are not good for humans. The first is understanding ethanol metabolism and fatty liver disease. Ethanol metabolism generates reactive oxygen species, which damages ApoB and prevents the liver from exporting triglycerides. In non-alcoholic models, choline deficiency prevents the liver from exporting fat out of the liver into cholesterol molecules, which is a pretty critical step in preventing fatty liver disease. Adequate protein, amino acids, and choline can basically prevent fatty liver disease from developing. Polyunsaturated fats actually oxidize a lot easier than saturated fats, which means that when you are eating them, your choline requirement to export them from the liver is much lower, which is why when people switch from saturated fats to polyunsaturated fats in short-term studies, you can temporarily resolve fatty liver disease because you basically can metabolize and actually burn off the PUFA a lot faster. More liver stuff. So liver fat and NASH progression, which is non-alcoholic steatohepatosis, needs to be given a specific look at here. Non-alcoholic models, saturated fats worsen liver fat in compared to polyunsaturated fats. However, polyunsaturated fats worsen non-alcoholic steatohepatosis. I can never say it, but NASH. And that's due to the oxidative damage that it does. The progression of NASH is actually more severe and more significant than the saturated fat to choline ratio. So as mentioned in human trials that run in the short term, we see what shows up in non-alcoholic animal models, with saturated fat increasing your liver fat and polyunsaturated fat reducing your liver fat. And then in the long term, so over extended periods, polyunsaturated fat, like linoleic acid, will actually worsen the progression of NASH, which is the true threat to your liver health and your longevity. And finally, in the LA Veterans Administration Study, we basically saw that for the first 8 years, there was no real deviation in the high polyunsaturated fat group. So we know that the detrimental effects of a high polyunsaturated fat or linoleic acid diet might not show up for 8 years. And there basically is no way we're ever going to run a study that long ever again. So if you want to cherry pick studies, that's fine. But to fully understand the risks of linoleic acid, you have to take it in the context of all of these specific mechanisms and pieces of science. So where does this leave us? Eating seed oils regularly, if you're like me, ever, is unhealthy. Especially in processed foods, it creates huge amounts of oxidative stress in the body. Cutting out seed oils isn't easy. It is in almost all foods. But understanding what's really going on in your body and maybe even your children's body when you feed them this food, I feel gives me kind of a level of awareness that makes it quite easy to avoid them. To start with, if you're looking for the cheat code guide on avoiding seed oils and processed foods, anything deep fried, stay away. That's fries, that's fried chicken, anything that would be prone to having a large plant-based fat in it. So vegan cookies like Oreos or even margarine, get that stuff out of your house. If you want to keep it simple, just eat less processed food. I know that sounds really, really, really patronizing. I have 2 very young children. I find myself learning which foods don't have a lot of this stuff in it and then just repeatedly buying those snacks. But thank you for sticking with me through all of that dense science. If you want more clear breakdowns on food and health, stick around. That's what I'm here for. Make sure you click the like and subscribe button so you can find out about future videos. And I want to take a second to talk to you about Patchwork. I run a company called Patchwork. We do what's called nutrigenomic screening. We take your DNA file and we look at your SNPs to work out specifically what foods are likely to cause inflammation for you on a genetic basis, what foods you'll be optimal on, what nutrient deficiencies you're likely to have, what detox systems are most likely to break or not run properly, and really just help you kind of navigate and stop making mistakes with your food so you can have a clear, under-obsessive view of the future in moving forwards. If you're interested in finding out about Patchwork, the link is in the description below. We have a little quiz to check out if Patchwork would work for you. Feel free to take it. It's totally free. Until next time, have a great day.